Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast.
Hello, Nest family. It's been a long week, to say the least, and we are recording a little bit later than normal, partially, I think, to get over the horror show that was Sydney at Kardinia Park, perhaps because North is on a Monday night now as well. So we had a bit more time to go through it all. But it's been sobering, I would say, to say the absolute least, everything that transpired in Geelong on Sunday. And it's been as unenjoyable a few days, I think, as Eagles fans have had in a long, long time, Drew Jones. How does it sit with you now a few days on?
Yeah, it still hurts in some ways. The overriding feeling at GMHBA Stadium on Sunday was partial shame, but just embarrassment, I think, because we had seen this movie before, but felt like we had moved on to a better place since then, and thought that our worst performance of the season was probably out of our system. And then just real disappointment that after the humbling that we got from the Western Bulldogs, that we weren't able to at least put together an even mildly competitive performance. So interesting, Garby, that there was over 9,000 at Kardinia Park on Sunday. I reckon at least 7,000 were Swans fans. So having been to lots of games in Melbourne, the West Coast contingent is normally really strong. So I think the Swans fans got the better of us in terms of travelling down and showing their support. So it was a bit of a shame, but maybe that's just a reflection of Kardinia Park and the place that it sits in West Coast fans' psyches, because I've already said on record, never again. So I'm hesitant to put any grand statements out there, but I won't be rushing down the highway to watch us play anytime soon.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. So plenty to get through today. Your Nest medal votes, you somehow managed to conjure up 5-1. Thanks for that. We'll go through those. We'll look at North Melbourne and the changes, and there might be a couple of high-profile axings. I'll put that to you, Drew, later on. That was something that came to me straight away. All right, I think it's time for a statement axing from Adam Simpson. A big-name player, a regular, probably needs to go to send a really stark message to the team. So we'll talk about that later on. I've got a couple in mind, but let's dwell on the game a little bit more and talk about where this leaves us. So I found it, a comedy show at times. I actually haven't laughed in a loss before, but I did a couple of times. A couple of times when we especially got the footy and then turned around to chip it across half back when we were down by like 10 goals. And you thought, all we can do now is try and muster some sort of confidence for next week and save a little bit of face. And we still start chipping it around at the back. I'm like, what are we doing? This is actually laughable. What is going on? Have we lost our way that much that we can't even find a way to try and build confidence for next week? That was bizarre. So I couldn't understand that. And then I started thinking about a couple other things. Where does this leave us? I think it's a mixture of, in terms of the past, a mixture of the final years of Mick Malthouse, where we were clearly just fading slowly as a playing group, getting to the end of its tenure. You knew we weren't going to win a flag, but we were still good enough to win the 8. A few gun players would get us through, but we had some defeats that just weren't becoming of us as a club. And then the Ken Judge era, when every now and again you just didn't turn up. You'd have a 100-point win the one week and then a 100-point loss the week after. And that's where this team is at. They're just soft, I'm sorry to say. And when it gets too tough, they just turn it in, like we've said so many times. As soon as I saw it cold and windy on the TV, Drewy, I thought we're in trouble here. They are not going to like this. They might have been fired up during the week. Spirits may have been good, but the minute they walked through for the warm-up and then through the banner to get going, and you could see it was about 8 degrees and the wind was blowing about 30 Ks an hour across the ground, you thought, this ain't going to suit our boys. And that's how it turned out.
Is that acceptable though? Like I'm laughing along. After about the first quarter and a half, I was with a few close mates who are West Coast fans, and we went into this full debrief mode because it was obvious, that we were going to get absolutely smashed. And we talked about where the blame lies. And ultimately, there's no excuse for that little mini Melbourne hub which existed for 3 or 4 days. West Coast didn't really do anything different to what they normally would do on an away trip. They stayed in the same hotel. They trained basically at the same, private schools that they normally do. So all the facilities were there, even though there were at times 18 clubs in Melbourne. They didn't miss out on anything. They didn't get a run on Punt Road, and they didn't do a captain's run at GMHBA Stadium. But they didn't stay in Geelong, so why drive down the highway to do a practice run on the ground? So everything was in their favour in terms of their preparation. They just had to come over a couple of days early. Every club essentially in the league was going through that, particularly the interstate ones. And Sydney had been in Melbourne already for 2.5 weeks. So if anyone was going to complain or have excuses for their preparation, it's the Swans. They haven't seen their families for 2.5 weeks. So, yeah, there were no excuses. And from the outside looking in, there was no reason why the players shouldn't have been hungry and up for the game. They're coming off a big loss against the Western Bulldogs, and they're playing the team that's level on points with them in 6th spot. Yeah. The difference between 6th and 7th is massive. A home elimination final, a lot easier to win than an away one. And ultimately, it's possibly going to be Sydney and West Coast jostling for spots 6 and 7 on the ladder. So I just can't find a reason for you, a simple reason why we would turn out such a terrible performance. But from being at the game, I can tell you the players have absolutely no confidence.
Yeah.
There was no dare. There was no willingness to take the game on. And that speaks to your point about it was almost laughable that when we got the ball, our first move was back or to the side, which just played into the hands of the Swans, who defensively was setting up well anyway. But when you give them that much chance to set up the zone, then there was no way we were going to be able to pick our way through.
But it's playing into the hands of every team right now. So that's Adam Simpson's challenge. He needs to apply surgery to the game plan and the mentality, both fronts. Now, they are still greats of our club, a lot of these players. And I think some of the reaction has annoyed me a little bit. I've seen some fans on Twitter saying, it's time to trade McGovern and Darling and bagging some of these players. Like, Jeremy McGovern's a 4-time All-Australian. Let's not forget what Jack Darling has done for our club and all these other guys. They're still champions, but they are low on confidence right now and the game plan's not suiting them. I think we need to have a little bit of respect for them and a little bit more respect for Adam Simpson, even though the challenge for him is great. And it can be salvaged, I think, although the chances of that are diminishing all the time. But the challenge is a huge one, and the mentality needs to shift. So what's happened? Why have they become so on and off, so hot and cold, so willing to turn over? These are guys that grinded it out in a year when we were tipped to finish bottom 4 and won a flag. Why has it changed? Are some of them overpaid? Have they become superstars in Perth? What's the difference? Why are they not motivated enough? So he needs to work that out. And then the game plan needs to change. It's too slow. It's way too slow. And maybe it did work to a point, but they've almost receded in the way in which it plays so much. And the chip across and the key possession has become too boring. Like, it used to have a little bit of zip about it. And they get it and they look sideways straight away, as opposed to maybe looking for a cutoff ball early. So he needs to tinker with that enormously, because teams sit back against us now and they know how to play against the Eagles. It is so easy. And against mid-range teams in the West, we tend to overrun them. But against good sides away from home or teams that apply the pressure, it's a cruise for them, right? It's an absolute cruise to sit back, soak it up, get the ball and hit us the other way. So the challenge for Simo is an enormous one. I'm fascinated to see what he does between now and the end of the season to change the player's mindset and then the game plan as well.
Yeah, so the overriding feeling, just touching on what you said there, is that, God, we looked easy to play against. Like, teams would relish playing West Coast right now. And the scouting report is pretty easy. Like, if you cut off that first 45-degree kick that goes forwards, then we're stuck. So that's thinking back to when we've played really good footy in the last couple of years. You remember that Collingwood game at home where we sliced the Pies apart? Kennedy, I think, kicked a bag. It was on, it's Optus Stadium. It was like an afternoon game, beautiful conditions, all that sort of stuff. So everything was in our favour. But the way we moved the ball that day was unbelievable, like slicing Collingwood apart. We did that, we did that to Collingwood on that day like 20 or 30 times. We didn't do it once against the Swans. In fact, we barely strung together 2 forward moving kicks in the same passage of play. So at no stage did off half back we get it into the corridor or anywhere close to forwards quickly. And that, I think, releases the ball movement a little bit. Yeah, and even late against Richmond, when we won that game, we moved the ball really well.
Yeah.
And that possibly was to do with Richmond tiring a little bit. It's clear that their structure and system isn't absolutely where it should be at the moment, which is why they've been losing games. So maybe that was a bit of a false dawn. But Sydney were disciplined. They're a really good side. They're well coached, as we know. And they've got leaders across each line who are able to implement this defensive system. And essentially, the message from the opposition coach playing against West Coast is cut off that movement and they will roll over. They'll kick it down the line. Someone will spoil it out of bounds. And then if you can halve the contest against Nick Nat, then you're fine, because we couldn't defend them. Like, they tore us apart. But then as soon as we got the ball, the game stopped moving completely. So defensively, we're clearly off.
Yeah.
And the pressure was down, or the stats show it. But the game plan just looks broken. And
the coach, and
it looks ill-suited to 2021 footy.
Yeah. So how the coach fixes it will be interesting. And then the other angle, everyone knows that Adam Simpson is capable of fixing it. The only question mark is whether his voice still carries enough weight for a playing group that's been with him for 8 years for that to resonate, or has it become too tired? And that's a valid question. Anyone who's doubting Adam Simpson as a coach, I think, is gone too far. But you can question whether he's been with this group too long to change things dramatically. That's the challenge for him. And that's going to be interesting to see whether he can do that and whether the players respond. I think they can. I think they're mature enough, smart enough, talented enough to do that. And there's enough of a bond there with the coach. But it's worth asking the question whether his voice still carries enough weight with that playing group right now, or whether it's just tired.
Yeah, so I have thought about this, because the immediate reactions, whether that they were talking about Simo's coaching tenure or about him specifically, is obviously over the top. I think, we can say that now. He's got a fair few runs on the board. The way to remedy that, if it's the belief from Adam Simpson and the hierarchy at West Coast that perhaps it's getting stale with some of the older players, is a new senior assistant, and you hand over a lot of responsibility to that person in terms of day-to-day training and also freshening the game plan. And Simo potentially takes a slight step back, and he still has the relationships with the players, but it's just not his voice over and over again drumming things into the players. It's someone new from outside of the West Coast system, bring some new ideas, some fresh thinking to training, and, day in, day out at the meetings. Simo's still running the club. He's still the figurehead. And then he can find new areas to be impactful and have someone else, give the players something fresh.
Yeah.
That would be my feel. There's a lot of good senior assistants out there, and the way that the coaching merry-go-round below the senior coach works is that there's always coaches available. So that might be something that West Coast look at. I know that Jamie Graham's really highly rated. Whether he would get a more prominent role and you promote from within, who knows? But it's something that other clubs have done, and it's been successful. Melbourne's the sexy example in getting Choco Williams in, but he's the one barking at training. He's the loud one. He's driving standards.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of Simon Goodwin taking a step away from that, letting Choco do that work. And all of a sudden now Mark Williams is being talked about as a candidate for the Collingwood job. So anyway, that would be one idea as far as how you freshen things up. So when I wrote about the game, Garby, after the match, when it was still quite fresh. I felt that it was one of those losses where you don't just talk about the loss, you talk about wider issues because it exposes a few areas of the club. Yeah. So the three areas that I would be thinking about after this game is, does it mean that we should be reassessing where the list build is at? B is, has the game plan gone stale, which we've sort of covered. And then 3 is the hunger gone, which again, is something that we've discussed already. So the hunger and the game plan potentially are linked. And then if you bring the list build into this, my guess would be we need another 2017 draft.
Yeah.
We need to immediately be able to just shove in a couple of players who are ready to go and who meet really specific needs to change a game plan, which is what we did from 2017 to 2018. So I don't think it's not unfixable.
No.
This is within our reach. There's still a lot of really good players on this list.
Yeah.
But if they need to identify what needs to change, and then they need to pick out players and coaches who can help make that change.
For sure. So a couple of people thought I was being soft last week after the Bulldogs defeat. I just wanted to see where we were at. And we got a fair indication that, massive changes are needed to the game plan, to the mentality, as I've said, and perhaps to the list. I still think the hunger is there in the list. I just think, for whatever reason, the minds have weakened. So I think the hunger is still accessible if you can find a way to just get into the minds and accelerate that inside the players right now. The talent is certainly there. Are we aging a little bit? Yes, potentially. I agree. 2017, Simo was under pressure as well, not to this extent, and not under pressure, although he was under pressure for his job then, actually, more than now, but he went and won a flag, so that changed. But he was under pressure to change the way we played. We were boring and regimented and one-dimensional, similar things to where we are now. And he found a way to do it. So he's done it before. Hopefully he can do it again, although time has gone on. In terms of the list, is that window still open or not? For me, it's closing rapidly. I think there's just a little bit of sliver of air going through the door. And I think we've got enough talent to maybe spark it up a little bit. And we've got 4 winnable games coming up, and the narrative can change very quickly. And who knows what happens at the start of next season with a few changes. But it's closing rapidly. And that is going to be interesting because the snap rebuild or reset, whatever you want to call it, may have to happen just like that if things don't improve. We're really in that sort of month-to-month proposition phase, I think, Drewy, where that's where you're assessing things and where you go in the future.
Yeah, my mind changes on this week to week, and that probably partially because we are talking about the Eagles so often. We're always reassessing and assessing where they're at. I haven't lost any confidence that the A-grade talent on this list is still as such. Sometimes it's hard to know when veterans go out of a team what effect that may have. We saw it with Priddis and Sam Mitchell. In the end, the team were probably better off the back of it. I'm not saying that we'd be better without Kennedy and Hearn, but we actually don't know. So with them getting towards the end of their careers, who knows how much longer they're going to play. That could either affect us positively or negatively. We don't. Well, that still remains to be seen. So yeah, it's a really hard one. I just think good clubs have shown over the last decade or however long you've been watching footy that they can turn things around quickly, and players can all of a sudden have a career year and you go from outside the 8 into contention. So yeah. I never think we're that far away. And, Tim Kelly could win a Brownlow, Oscar Allen could win a Coleman medal. That we could have numerous All-Australians from some of the guys who are coming through. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're back into contention. So yeah, at the moment we've got pick 9 in the draft this year. And then let me scroll down. Our second rounder is 28. And we've got 35, which is tied to Port Adelaide. So that could slide backwards if they go up the ladder. So there's 2 picks in the top, 3 picks in the top 35. And then we'll have to wait a while for our next one.
So the chance of a 2017 set is there. Adam Simpson speaking as we're speaking right now, and none of his comments seem to be overly emotional. It seems to be pretty similar to what he said last week, which will probably frustrate people a bit, but he's remaining calm. I wonder if he makes a high-profile axing, Drew. Let's get onto this before we do the votes and talk about some of the players who did impress. I wonder if he makes a high-profile axing and a regular player goes. Reading his comments doesn't seem like that will happen, but who knows? For me, I think it's worth making one just to really send a message to the group like, this cannot happen again. Mm-hmm. And if it happens again, you'll go the way of this player and you'll be out of the team. I don't care who you are. For me, that player is Jamie Cripps. I don't think he's done anything in the last 4 to 6 weeks. And our forward pressure is poor. He's there to lay 4 tackles a game, chase people down and average 1.5 goals a game a season. That's Jamie Cripps's remit. He did it early in the season. He's done it over the journey. He's not doing it now at all. I think that's the kind of player that you can say, mate, we're getting let down in that department, have a spell in the twos, and we're going to bring in someone young to play that role and give us a spark there. And it sends a message to the rest, and they all go, geez, Cripper got axed. Bloody hell. I mean, I don't play well this week. Maybe it's me, So I feel as though it's that a time for one of those decisions. It might not happen. And here's the player that comes to mind for me. Is there anyone for you?
How would you feel if Dom Sheed got dropped for Xavier O'Neill?
Oh, that would be harsh for a guy. I know that he didn't play well, but he still had 38 possessions. It's a big number. His form has still been good enough this season. I think that'd be pretty harsh on Dom Sheed. I don't see him as being a player in the gun, no.
Yeah, it probably does. It feels a little bit over the top for me, but Sheed was really bad with ball in hand, especially early. When the game was on the line, like he turned the ball over a few times, broken tackles. Stats can be deceiving. It wasn't a great 38 possession game, but you got to give credit to him for getting the footy. Any sort of midfield axing is probably saved by Jack Redden, who's got a knee injury. He's going to miss a few weeks. Andrew Gaff, obviously, on the way back. Probably Luke Edwards goes out of the team, but I think it was the third quarter. I was obviously so done with the game. I just started watching him, and he covers the ground really well. Like, obviously not something you ever see on TV, but he made himself available for a kick-in. Like, he led from the wing up into the back 50. We obviously transitioned the ball well because he ended up very quickly down the other end, inside 50, and we had the ball on the wing, and we muffed the kick going inside 50, but he had gone all the way the length of the ground and then circled back around probably Darling, who had led up, and made himself available inside 50 to the opposite flank. So that gives you an idea of his work rate. That was in the third quarter, and we were losing by 70 points. So he was still running hard, still making position. So as far as Luke Edwards goes, there's no lack of effort, and his aptitude to playing his role on the wing, really good. But probably Gaff comes in for him, you would think, a couple of quiet weeks. Or do you think we persist?
No, I'd say he probably goes out. He had a quiet game. It's 2 in a row. I know he came in late for Gaff, but I'd be surprised if he survived. So I'd say he probably goes out. In terms of the other changes, and we can get into them now, Jared Brander is probably one you look at bringing in and saying, all right, try and give us that spark and the kind of games that you did early on in the season. Nathan Vardy was horrific. Like, it's just, for a guy who's so experienced and had some big games for us, he just looked so incredibly out of place. So I think you go back to Bailey Williams as the second ruck and say, Bailey, have a go, and try and recapture some of the efforts that you gave us early on in the season. Jermaine Jones is injured, so that's, a bit of a blow. Who do you look to? Archie, maybe, for Cripps, if he makes that move, but I can't see it happening. But maybe Archie comes in now to try and give us something like he did in that game against Hawthorn at the MCG. You have to make 3 or 4 changes. I don't think he's going to necessarily have the same amount as recent weeks, but there's got to be a few, and those are the players that come to mind, and Jakey Waterman will be in the mix as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with the team balance. Like if Jake Waterman comes in against North Melbourne playing at home, like he'll probably kick 2 or 3. Like he'll probably do enough. It's like, is there any point in doing that? Like, what do we learn?
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like there aren't that many other candidates for the small forward positions.
Isaiah Winder, maybe it's chuck in Winder and just say, have a run, son. Just go there and just run for 4 quarters.
He has been injured. He is back though, and the Waffle Eagles didn't play last week because of the postponement. So it might be a little soon for him. As much as I like where your head's at.
Connor West could be the player that comes in. It could be Connor West time. Just chuck him in for something fresh in the middle. Yeah,
I just think having a young player in the team, bringing some new skills to the table, gives everyone a bit of a lift. I think it potentially could be a really good opportunity to get Connor out there. I think most West Coast fans would like to see what he can do. If you're not an avid Waffle follower, you don't really know much about him other than that he's certainly capable of getting the ball. So, yeah, he's in the mix. Like, clearly, Vardy's not going to play. What did you think of Witherden's game?
Oh, poor, like really poor. It was just, unfortunately, all the deficiencies that Alex Witherden has and the question marks all came to the fore in one game. Like, just not great in a contest. Is he a good defensive decision maker? No. And when the going gets tough, does he disappear a little bit? Which is probably all the things that Brisbane questioned about him and why they didn't play him in that last season. They were all highlighted in one game. I still think he could be a good player for us, and he was most certainly not on his own when it came to that. There were plenty other customers, and maybe he gets exposed a bit more because that is his deficiency. But it wasn't a good game for him, and I'd like to see him stay in the team because I think he can add a bit, but it wouldn't surprise if that was such a poor performance that he goes out. You?
Yeah, I'm a big Witherden apologist, but I didn't love what I saw on the weekend. I think he still has a long-term spot in the team. Just whether that fits in right now with Hearn still there, maybe not. Someone told me an interesting story. I don't know if you've heard this before about he played his first Waffle game for the Eagles reserve side. And apparently he really got stuck, like he got sledged a lot. And the opposition team were getting stuck into him so much because literally every time he got the ball, he fucked it up. Like he turned it over like nearly every time he had it. He was so rusty and so low on confidence. It was just horrific. But then, and the players that played against him, they had this big laugh because in the West Australian, say on Monday, when they did the Waffle report, it was like Witherden had 24 touches and was good, but he was just shocking. Yeah. So, it's a good lesson probably for those of us who just look at the stats in the Waffle and you decide if a player should be in or out based on that. But he's got some work to do, and he's coming off a season where he went from one of Brisbane's first picked players and a really integral part of their team to being out of the side. Absolutely, his confidence may have taken a hit. Maybe it might take him a little bit of time to get back to being comfortable with where he's at as a player. So a bit of patience wouldn't go astray.
Yeah. And then there's Josh Rotham to potentially come back in as well, who was, a semi-high profile axing as well. No one really saw that coming necessarily. So what does Adam Simpson do with him? Does he come straight back in for Witherden? Quite possibly. Does he give him another week and say, no, I know what can be done at the back. We need to be a bit more attacking. We need, we can't ask for 1 week us to be a slightly more attacking side out of defense and then have such a horrible game that we drop Alex Witherden straight away. That's what he can do for us. He can potentially change the way that we distribute the ball from the back. So I wouldn't mind if he stayed in another week, but at the same time, I could understand if he was axed. So that will all be interesting. Let's go through the votes to finish off the Nest Medal. Thank you for bringing them to us. Drewy, you're 5-1, and then I'll give you mine afterwards and we can update the count.
Yo, 5, Darling 4, Shep 3, Duggan 2, Hearn won. So I'll keep it brief. Yo's tackling and endeavour around the ball, I felt like he was nearly the only one who was trying. One of his better games. I mean, he's pretty much played well every week since he's been back, but he was really good in the midfield. Darling, he gets 4 from me just because he actually was just trying hard all day, sort of back to the Jack that we know. And if it was, if the score was reversed, he probably kicks 4 or 5. Shep, one of his better games of the year, kept trying. Duggo was good, has been a bit off since he's come back from injury, but was decent on Sunday. And Hearn got 1, but I couldn't think of too many times where he made mistakes, so that gave him 1 vote.
Yeah, I mean, Yo 5 for me, Shep 4, tried hard defensively, didn't have too much help. Darling 3, that was any positive from the day, is that Jack Darling showed some good form again, took some big pack marks early, and then literally everything went to water around him, but he was solid. Hearn 2 for the same reasons. I gave 1 to Nick Nat. I know he probably lowered his colours in the ruck, but again, he tried. He battled hard. He didn't give up, unlike some others. But did he deserve 1? I don't know. I actually thought Zach Langdon was okay. He was one player I thought, you know what? He worked hard. He laid some tackles. He tried to make things happen. There were far worse players than him. So I didn't mind Zach Langdon's game, but I gave 1 to Nick. I don't think it'll make much of a difference in the end. What were the 5-1s, Drewy? And I'll update the leaderboard.
So Yo just edged out Shep for 5 votes. So he got 61, Shep 57. So 5 to Yo, 4 to Shep. And then Darling clearly third on 44. Liam Duggan clearly second, 29. And Dom Sheed managed to get himself some votes, 16 of those. So he gets the 1 for his 38 possession game.
Well, 38 touches, okay. I didn't mind that call too much. So Nick Natanui well out in front on 32 votes. Jack Darling now moves back into second on 23. Tim Kelly on 21. He stalled. His conditioning doesn't look great again. That's a bit of a worry. I wonder in his time off, did he put on a kilo or 2? I'm not sure. He just seems to waver with that a little bit, but geez, he's returned poorly from that injury. He needs to get going. Tom Barras, 21. The Dom Sheet up to 16 now. Gaff, 14. Redden, 14. Allen, 13. Brad Shepherd up to 8 after a slow start. He's getting going. And McGovern, 7. Petrocelli, 7. Elliot Yo now 6, level with Shannon Hearn. So couple of movers there. Jack Darling back up to second. But, we need to see a better performance from Tim Kelly, that's for sure. He's been horrible the last couple of weeks. And it annoys me a little bit when as soon as he plays a really bad game, people go, oh, have the Eagles stuffed it with Tim Kelly? And some people say, has he done anything since he joined the club? I'm like, yes, he has. He still won us a few games. He still polled like double-figure Brownlow votes last season. He's just really inconsistent. The gaps between his best and his worst are just so large. And he was probably leading our best and fairest in the first 6 weeks of the season. But now he's dropped away again. So he just needs to find a way to level out. And I do worry if his conditioning wavers too much. He seems like he's the kind of player that when he maybe puts on a kilo or 2, has a bad eating week, his game falls away with it. He needs to be in tip-top condition in that sense.
Start of the season, he was in ripping nick and he was playing great footy. So a couple more weeks, get him back into shape. When the whips are cracking, he'll be back to his best, we hope. So Monday night football against North Melbourne. Hopefully, West Coast fans turn out. 60,000 at Optus is the capacity now. Is there any way we lose to North?
North have actually been playing well the last month. I mean, their system and their work rate and all that has been good. They just don't have the quality, really. They just don't have enough top quality players. I mean, there's Cameron Zerha's in really good form. Davies Uniacke gives him some spark in the middle. Simkin and Dumont do a bit. Cunnington's playing nicely. Defensively, Mackay's going really well. But they just don't have a lot outside of that. So, of course, we should win. And the response should be enormous. And in front of our own fans, the boys should get a lift as well. I won't be getting excited by even a 10-goal win because we know we can do that. And even if we win 3 of our next 4 or all of our next 4, the test will come when we play Melbourne away or Brisbane at home. But what we can do is hopefully win games, build confidence, tinker with the game plan a little bit so that when we come up against a big team, the mentality shifted a little bit and we're confident in what we're doing and we can take it to them and beat them. That's the challenge. Of course, we should win on Monday night. I think we will win, but again, it wouldn't shock you if we put in another horrid performance either, such as the way in which it's gone this season.
Yeah, I actually don't think there's too much to really say about the game because unless we lose, which we shouldn't, but that's in the aftermath and not in the build-up. It's a game that obviously we have to win because, GWS, Fremantle, Richmond, they're all going to be thinking they can make the finals. So they're going to be teams snapping at our heels if we continue to drop games. But I'm looking forward to hopefully enjoying a West Coast performance for the first time in a couple of weeks. But my socks will not be knocked off by much unless, we get a young player come in and do a good job for the team. So looking forward to the weekend of footy and then settling in on Monday night to hopefully see a win.
That'll be nice. It's always good watching the boys, and Monday night will be the perfect time zone for us. So can't wait for that. Hopefully we have a win. Hopefully we've made sense of everything that happened on the weekend and where we're at and where we go in the future. Give us your feedback. We love it. Thanks for all your kind words and support. It's good fun. And, hopefully we can get back to winning ways soon and the season can end positively. And who knows what happens in the run-in. Maybe we can make something of it still. Drewy, thank you, mate. And go Eagles on Monday night.
Thanks, Garby. Stay safe in lockdown. Everyone stay happy and healthy around the country.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.